when I walked into the courtroom in uniform, Dad smirked. "There she goes," he muttered just loudly enough for my sister to hear. She laughed without looking up from her phone. Still putting on an act, I kept walking. 10 years earlier, I would have answered. I would have explained every promotion, every exam I passed, every night I spent studying, while everyone else insisted I was chasing impossible dreams. None of it had ever mattered. In my family, confidence was treated as arrogance if it came from me, so I said nothing. The courtroom was already filling with lawyers, clerks, and officers. I took my assigned position near the front. My uniform wasn't a costume. It represented years of service, discipline, and responsibilities that rarely allowed mistakes. Dad and my sister were there because of a civil dispute involving property after my grandmother's death. I wasn't connected to the case. By coincidence, I had been assigned courtroom security that morning. I hoped the hearing would pass quietly. Instead, Dad caught my eye again. "You finally found a stage," he said. I looked away before answering. "The courtroom isn't a stage." He shrugged as though he'd won something. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Routine settled over the room. Files opened. Names were confirmed. Attorneys prepared their notes. Then the judge looked toward the officers. His eyes stopped on me for a long second. He didn't continue reading. Instead, he lowered the file. "Dear God," he whispered almost to himself. "It's her." The courtroom became strangely still. Dad frowned. "Who do you mean?" he asked before realizing he'd spoken aloud. The judge ignored the interruption. He simply nodded toward me with quiet respect. "I wasn't aware Officer Hale was assigned here today." I acknowledged him with a small nod. "Yes, Your Honor." There was nothing dramatic in the exchange, no music, no applause. Just recognition between two professionals. The attorneys looked briefly confused before one of them smiled. "I remember that case," she said softly. Another lawyer nodded. "So do I." My father looked from one face to another. "What case?" No one answered immediately. The judge finally spoke. "Several years ago, Officer Hale's testimony and evidence preservation prevented a wrongful conviction in one of the most closely reviewed cases this court has handled." His voice remained calm. "Without her professionalism, an innocent man might have spent decades in prison." Silence settled across the room. The judge continued arranging his papers. Her work became required reading in judicial training regarding evidence handling. He said it as if he were mentioning the weather. To him, it was simply fact. To my family, it sounded impossible. Dad stared at me. "You never told us." I almost smiled. I tried. Memory returned with uncomfortable clarity. The dinner where I mentioned receiving a commendation. Dad changed the subject. The holiday gathering where I explained I had been assigned to a major investigation. My sister laughed and asked whether I was exaggerating again. The phone calls that slowly became shorter because every achievement somehow turned into another joke. Eventually, I stopped sharing. Not because I had nothing worth saying, because I was tired of proving that my life was real. The hearing resumed, witnesses spoke, documents were reviewed. Lawyers argued over legal details that had nothing to do with me. I remained where I belonged, doing the job I'd been assigned. No one gave me special treatment, no one needed to. The respect already existed before my family ever walked through those courtroom doors. When the hearing ended, people packed their files and left in quiet conversation. Dad waited near the exit. For the first time in years, he looked uncertain. "I didn't know, I know, I thought." He never finished the sentence, because whatever he thought could no longer compete with what he'd witnessed. My sister stood beside him, unusually quiet. She looked embarrassed, but not transformed. Some habits don't disappear in a single afternoon. Neither do old hurts. Dad cleared his throat. "You should have insisted we listen." I shook my head. "No." He looked confused. "If someone only believes you after a stranger confirms your worth, they weren't listening in the first place." He lowered his eyes. There wasn't much left to say. Outside, the afternoon sun reflected off the courthouse windows. People hurried down the steps carrying briefcases, coffee cups, and ordinary worries. Life continued. I walked toward my patrol vehicle behind me. I heard my father call my name once. I turned. He gave a small nod, not an apology, not forgiveness, just recognition. For years, I thought that moment would feel like victory. Instead, it felt surprisingly quiet. The courtroom hadn't changed who I was. It had only revealed someone my family had refused to see. And for the first time, I realized I no longer needed them to.